Welcome to another episode from our Growth Tips series, the place to grow you, grow your business, and live the life you want to live. Today we're looking at how to properly price your services. Okay, so let's get into it. Why would you want to price your services correctly? Without knowing your cost of service delivery, you cannot reliably grow your business without knowing if it's viable or know whether you're actually losing money. 90% of businesses close the doors before they reach 5 years, and only 4% make it to 10 years. Industry and how we do business is changing rapidly at the moment. If you think the current situation is bad, it's about to get much worse. The majority of small business owners are what we might call accidental business owners. They didn't really set out to grow a business. They might have been forced into self-employment, and as things got busier, they started to take on extra staff. Now, whether that's your story, it doesn't matter. But we want to make sure the future doesn't happen by chance. Everything you do from now on will be on purpose. So much so that hopefully the future of your business will be predictable. We can be really busy and get carried away with the excitement of seeing the business growing quickly, but lose sight of the fact until the accountant phones us up and tells you there's a serious problem, or worse still, your bank manager. If you can reliably know how much it's costing to deliver a service, you can only then know at what level to price your services at. If you know this, you know whether you're losing money, know that you become unable to work, or if you become unable to work, you can find someone else to do the work without the business losing money. And good forward planning. If you price according to where you expect to be, it gives you that bridge between where you are now and where you want to be. Growth doesn't come as an accident. This program is about making it happen on purpose. How do you price a service? We can compare the rest of the market. Perhaps you might phone around and ask how much your competitors charge per hour, pretending to be a customer. They might tell you what the hourly rate is or the daily rate for one-off work, but larger priced or packaged work will almost always be priced lower. This route is okay if you choose to compete on price. It is always best to try not competing on price, as that route is really just a race to bankruptcy. Eventually your price is so low, you may as well be paying the customer to do the work. So we really want to do that. Or do we really want to do that? Otherwise, this route is okay if you want to get a good feel for the average market rate. But how do you price something to make sure you're covering your costs as a minimum? The more sensible option is to calculate it. First, look at the total productive chargeable time available. You can use your own numbers here, but let's assume it's a 40-hour week, and after break times, etc., have been taken out, you calculate that the total productive chargeable time is 37.5 hours per week. That's 37.5 hours multiplied by the number of chargeable weeks. So let's say that's 47 weeks, assuming holidays, training, sickness, maternity, etc. are taken in that 5 other weeks. So 37.5 hours multiplied by 47 weeks equal 1,762.5 chargeable hours. Now, obviously, holidays, sickness, training, and especially maternity leave are going to take more than 5 weeks in a year. So calculate it for your business. You could take it as an average, and this is purely just an example. Now, for that number of chargeable hours, we assume that we'll need a portion of overhead. So let's use this as a really quick example below. Now, obviously, you'll go through all of your own costs to do this exercise. We've got some part-time admin support in there for 8,000. We've got marketing for 4,000. We've got business premise costs, maybe office space, maybe workshop or storage space, and that's 3,000. We've got equipment cost of 1,000. And finally, we've got non-productive time and other costs such as insurance, accreditations, etc. This is the cost of paying people while they're on holiday, on training days, etc. And remember, these are just random numbers. They might be completely different to what the real cost is for your business. But we're using 4,000 for this example. So that makes a total overhead of 20,000 per year. So then the cost of an individual to deliver that service, including national insurance, pension, etc., let's assume is £15 per hour. Now, I don't need to say this if you've seen our video about how to find your ideal customer. But if not, go and watch it next before you do anything else. In summary of that training though, make sure this rate is what it costs you to employ someone else. It's not what you'd pay yourself. The aim of this exercise is to completely remove yourself from the business. It doesn't matter if you stay working in it exactly as you are now, but consider this point. What happens if you price something at say £10 per hour, but then you get run over by a car and you're unable to work for the next 6 months? If it costs you £20 per hour to employ someone, it's going to be costing you more than you're getting paid. And you're still without a salary for yourself. One route to make sure you're covered is to take the industry union rates and then add 5 or 10%. That way you should hopefully be able to attract someone decent. Now you might say it won't matter because you've got insurance to cover that. Well, maybe you do, but that's only covering for a portion of your wages. If you aren't able to work for the next 6 months, your business is dead. Your customers will go elsewhere. You won't have a business to go back to. In fact, depending on the type of customer, they might even sue you for not completing the work on time. So let's get this right. And why wouldn't we want to spend a few minutes to get this right anyway? Now we take that total overhead and divide it by the total productive chargeable hours. In this case, that's 20,000 divided by 1,762.5. This gives us an overhead per hour cost of $11.35 per hour, or a 75.6% markup fee on the hourly rate cost. This calculates to $26.35 that we absolutely must charge the customer. Now we haven't added any profit into this figure yet, and if we weren't to do so, it would still be advisable to add a contingency to this figure. Jobs might take longer, or some overheads might creep up in price. You want to make sure they're covered. The amount you add is up to you, but between 10 to 20% is pretty standard in other areas of business such as project budgeting. Next, you want to add a profit markup. In this case, let's say you're adding 15%. So in this example, we're not adding a contingency. So it will be the cost of service delivery rate at $26.35. Add 15%, which equates to £30.30 per hour charge out rate. Assuming everything went to plan, you'd make 13% net profit. overhead predictions for growth. Now, something a little more tricky is to forecast overhead according to growth expectations, but this is something you must do if you intend to change the company's position or structure in any way. So let's look at how we might do that. Let's assume your growth plans are to grow from 1 chargeable staff member to 4. Over the course of a year, or perhaps you might be pricing a contract that will take 4 staff immediately. Now, obviously, the amount of chargeable hours available, along with the amount of overhead, will depend on how quickly you make that change. For this example, we're going to assume we're at the end of the year and all of this is in place. Using the earlier overhead structure, let's adjust the numbers. So the admin cost, that goes up to about 12,000. Marketing has risen to 16,000. Premises have stayed the same at 3,000. Equipment has gone up to 2,000. And the non-productive and other costs element has risen to 12,000. In addition though, you now need to have a cost for managing the business and the people doing the work. We'll put that at 25,000. So that brings the total overhead under this structure to 71,000. The total chargeable hours capacity has grown from 1,762.5, and we now multiply that by 4. That brings the total hours to 7,050. Looking at our earlier calculation method, we now take the total overhead and divide it by the total hours. In this case, giving us an overhead markup of £10.07 per hour, or a 67.1% markup on the hourly rate. So this means the minimum charge out rate is now £25.07 per hour plus any contingency. So based on charging the original charge out rate of £30.30, we'll now make a 17.2% net profit. And if all goes to plan, we'll make 36,871, assuming we can charge for that number of hours during the period. Now, a few people have asked how to calculate rates for working out of hours, and also how much to charge for call-outs. So let's just take a look at each of those quickly. Now, for most service categories, if there are union rates involved, they will normally say that an employee is paid either time and a half or double time if they've already done their normal daytime shift, or perhaps if it's a weekend or a public holiday. If, however, the employee is working nights entirely, and that's what makes up their weekly hours, then the shift rate is normally time and a third, or 1.3 times the standard rate. Now, obviously, different service categories will differ for this. For example, some services are always provided out of hours anyway. But let's have a look at an example. So here we've used the earlier example when the standard rate was £15 per hour. So calculating that at shift rate, and we're now paying out £19.50 an hour. We've based the overhead on a set rate per hour, but you could equally do it on a percentage uplift from your standard rate. Obviously, unless you know how many total hours you'll have to work with though, it makes it hard to stay competitive. So for this example, we're just using the standard overhead rate per hour. It would be worth reviewing this rate according to the average hours being worked every month, because you can obviously see how the overhead allowance is working out in real time and adjust it if necessary that way. Now, if most of your work is done during normal hours and you just get an occasional contract working out of hours, say for a few hours a month, you could argue that most of your overhead is already covered. But what you need to consider is that over time, that area of the work might increase to such an extent that it makes up, say, 40% or more of your business. And if you've not allowed any overhead in that, your business is going to be in serious trouble. Okay, so looking at how much to charge for call-out rates. Now we've calculated the out of hours working rates, and we should now have a schedule of rates for every time of day and every situation. So assuming it's a Sunday evening and you get a call out, you've calculated that your out of hours rates for a Sunday evening calculates to be £40 per hour. Now you probably also have a call out fee or call out standby to pay to your employee, and the unions will probably determine what that is. Now don't forget to include any employer costs to be added to that. So in the UK you'll add the percentage for employer national insurance contributions to that. But let's assume everything added up equals £20. Most companies charge for the first hour on site, included in their call out rate, plus any travel time to and from the location. So let's assume the location takes about 30 minutes to get there, 30 minutes to get back, and it's 15 miles each way. So we'll allow 2 hours in labour and the mileage cost of £30. And by the way, don't worry if you haven't got a mileage rate. We'll look at that in the next video. So add all of that together and it gives you a minimum call-out rate of £130 for the first hour on site. Obviously, any materials that you might use would have to be stated as being additional, or you could make an allowance in the rate for them too. So using the costing tool in the workbook, calculate what your overheads are. Calculate how many hours are chargeable within your business. Calculate what the current minimum charge out rate is. And compare it to your current rate that you charge already. Next, look at how it changes if you can add 2 extra charge out staff. And don't forget to add any additional overhead you think it might take to manage that capacity. Reaching capacity. So one last point to make. If looking at growth, if you already have overhead in the business, at what point does that overhead have to increase to meet the additional demand? Let me give you an example. In an earlier example, we said that the manager was brought in to manage the business with 4 staff. Now let's assume that manager will be at peak performance when they hit 6 staff. That means that when you have capacity to have 7 staff, you then have a full new overhead of £25,000 to pay for to cover that additional management. Now obviously for that example you might be able to get part-time staff to cover the extra demand, but either way, depending on what it is, you might have that fixed overhead cost to consider. Likewise, you've then got to consider if there'll be an additional cost to managing those 2 managers as well. Again, this should be factored in to make sure you're covered. Another example, let's look at your business premises. How much can your business grow before it needs larger premises? Perhaps anything over 4 staff will mean taking on additional new premises of equal size, which means double the premises overhead for only an additional 25% growth in capacity. That's it. Next time we'll be looking at how to price your mileage fee. Thank you for watching. I hope you've got some value from this. If you think others would get some value from it, please invite them to join the various social media groups and pages. As a bit of fun after you complete the workbook, why not post how your current charge out rate compares with a calculated rate in the social groups and pages. And that's it until the next time. Thanks for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.